In the quiet town of Willowbrook, where tradition runs deep and secrets linger in the shadows, Charlotte Patel once made a choice that would haunt her for years to come. She rejected Carter Nielsen, the poor farmer whose dreams were as vast as the fields he tended. To her, he was nothing but a boy with wildflowers and unrealistic ambitions, a boy who dared to love above his station. But fate, it seems, has a twisted sense of humor. Years passed, and Carter, fueled by the fire of rejection, transformed himself from a humble farmer into a self-made billionaire. His return to Willowbrook isn't just triumphant, it's transformative. Now, as Carter stands at the threshold of his past, the question lingers in the air: will Charlotte recognize the man she once dismissed? And more importantly, will he forgive the woman who shattered his heart, or will he walk away, leaving her to drown in the price of regret? This is a story of loss, growth, and the unexpected return of love, a story where the past meets the present, and second chances aren't just possibilities but necessities. Carter Nielsen woke up at the crack of dawn, his hands calloused from years of tilling the soil on his modest farm in Willowbrook Valley. The son of generations of farmers, he never minded the lack of luxury. His life was simple, yet filled with purpose. What he didn't know was that his heart was about to be swept off its feet by a love that defied social boundaries. Charlotte Patel, the daughter of the wealthy owner of the region's largest winery, was the woman who captured Carter's gaze from afar. He'd watch her stroll through the fields, her silk dress fluttering in the breeze, and feel as though he were in the presence of an unattainable goddess. "Hey, Carter," she'd call out sometimes, with a smirk that he mistook for interest. He didn't realize that her smile was merely polite, not a sign of reciprocation. While he cultivated wheat, Charlotte cultivated roses in her garden, symbolizing two lives that seemed destined never to cross. The difference between them was like the chasm between dry earth and crystal ocean, an abyss that Carter was about to try to bridge, even if it meant drowning in the process. After all, who hasn't risked everything for a love that seemed impossible? And so, Carter decided it was time to declare his feelings, even if it meant facing the town's laughter and the Patel family's disdain. As they say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. He was ready to take that shot, ready to change his life forever, or shatter it completely. Carter Nielsen stood at the edge of the Patel estate, his boots caked with mud from the morning's work. In his hands, he clutched a bouquet of wildflowers, their petals still glistening with dew. He'd rehearsed his words 1,000 times in front of the barn mirror, but as he stepped onto the well-manicured lawn, his throat tightened. Charlotte Patel emerged from the grand house, her silk dress catching the sunlight like a prism. "Carter," she said, her voice dripping with the honey of pity, "you're sweet, really. But do you honestly think a man who still drives that rusted tractor can offer me anything?" Her laugh was like the clink of ice in a glass, cold and deliberate. She plucked a flower from his hand, letting it drop to the ground. "Ambition is cute when it's wrapped in a suit, not when it's hiding behind overalls." The words cut deeper than any plow ever could. As Carter stumbled back down the gravel path, his heart felt like a stone in his chest. But somewhere beneath the pain, a spark ignited. "I'll show her," he muttered, the words barely audible over the roar of his own humiliation. And with that, the seed of transformation began to take root. Carter started rising even earlier, the pre-dawn hours becoming his time for planning, not just planting crops, but planting dreams. He'd heard of self-made men, of rags to riches romances that defied all odds, and something in him ignited. "If they can do it, why can't I?" he'd ask himself, as he pored over business books borrowed from the town library. The pain of rejection, that sharp, aching thing in his chest, became his compass. Every time he thought of Charlotte's laugh, the way she'd crushed the wildflower he'd given her, he'd work a little harder, save a little more, dream a little bigger. The neighbors noticed the change first. Old Man Jenkins, who'd known Carter's father and grandfather, squinted as he watched Carter repairing an old silo with his own hands. "That boy's got fire in his eyes now," he'd mutter to his wife over coffee. And indeed, Carter was transforming, not just his circumstances, but himself. The farmer who once measured his worth by bushels of wheat was now calculating profits, exploring opportunities, and slowly, methodically, building the foundation for something grand. Something that would make Charlotte Patel not just see him, but see him truly. Because as Carter often reminded himself during those long, sleepless nights, the comeback he deserved wasn't just a phrase, it was a promise. Carter stumbled through the dirt roads of Willowbrook, the weight of Charlotte's words pressing down on him like a physical force. "A man who still drives that rusted tractor," she'd said, and the image of his beloved old John Deere, chugging along with its paint peeling, flashed before his eyes. That night, as he lay in his creaky bed, the moonlight streaming through the window, he made a decision that would change everything. "I might be a farmer," he muttered to the darkness, "but I'm not a fool." And with that, the seed of transformation began to take root. Carter started rising even earlier, the pre-dawn hours becoming his time for planning, not just planting crops, but planting dreams. He'd heard of self-made titans, men who'd climbed from dirt roads to skyscrapers, and he knew their path wasn't lined with luck, it was paved with grit. "I'll learn their secrets," he vowed, as he pored over business books borrowed from the town library. "I'll master their strategies." And with each mile that separated him from Charlotte Patel and the life he'd known, Carter felt the old farmer inside him dying, making way for something sharper, something unstoppable. After all, as he often jotted in his notebook during those long train rides, the price of regret is higher than the cost of risk. And so, with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of resolve, Carter Nielsen began his silent exodus, a departure that would one day be remembered as the moment everything changed. The Willowbrook train station had never felt so empty. Carter Nielsen stood on the platform, his old suitcase, stuffed with a few clothes, his father's pocket watch, and a tattered notebook of business ideas, resting at his feet. The morning mist clung to the ground like a shroud, as though the town itself was mourning his departure. He glanced back at the familiar landscape, the rolling hills where he'd once chased fireflies as a boy, the Patel estate standing tall and judgmental in the distance. "This isn't goodbye," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "It's a strategic retreat." The train whistle pierced the silence, and Carter boarded without looking back. As the locomotive chugged away, he pressed his forehead against the cool glass, watching Willowbrook shrink into a dot. "They think I'm running from failure," he mused, a faint smile playing on his lips, "but I'm actually running toward success." The journey ahead was uncertain, but Carter had something he'd never had before, a clear vision. He'd read about self-made titans, men who'd climbed from dirt roads to skyscrapers, and he knew their path wasn't lined with luck, it was paved with grit. "I'll learn their secrets," he vowed, as he pored over business books borrowed from the town library. "I'll master their strategies." And with each mile that separated him from Charlotte Patel and the life he'd known, Carter felt the old farmer inside him dying, making way for something sharper, something unstoppable. After all, as he often jotted in his notebook during those long train rides, the price of regret is higher than the cost of risk. And so, with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of resolve, Carter Nielsen began his silent exodus, a departure that would one day be remembered as the moment everything changed. Carter arrived in the bustling city of Newbridge with nothing but the shirt on his back and a mind full of plans. The skyscrapers loomed above him like giants, their glass windows reflecting the ambition he now carried in his heart. He started small, taking a job as a laborer on a construction site, his calloused hands now gripping steel beams instead of plow handles. "Every great empire begins with a single brick," he'd muttered during his lunch breaks, as he watched the buildings rise around him. By night, he devoured books on finance, real estate, and entrepreneurship, his notebook filled with strategies and ideas. The farmer's secret rise became his silent mantra, a reminder that his past didn't define his future. He saved every penny, invested wisely, and slowly, opportunities began to knock. A small property here, a business venture there, Carter's empire grew like a quiet storm. While Charlotte Patel sipped wine at her father's vineyard, toasting to a life she thought perfect, Carter was building something that would one day cast a shadow over her world. The years blurred into a tapestry of sweat and sacrifice, each thread woven with determination. When people asked about his past, he'd simply shrug and say, "I'm a man who believes in second chances, for myself." And as the city began to whisper his name, Carter knew that the day of reckoning was near. The boy who'd once been mocked for his ambitions was now a force to be reckoned with, his heart still bearing the scars of rejection but his spirit unbroken. After all, as he often reminded himself during those sleepless nights, when power meets the past better be ready to bow. The Newbridge skyline had a new jewel, a towering skyscraper with Nielsen Enterprises emblazoned in LED lights across the top. Carter Nielsen stood in his penthouse office, the city sprawling beneath him like a tapestry of success. His tailored suit fit perfectly, a world away from the overalls he'd once worn. The transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. "They used to laugh at my dreams," he mused, adjusting his tie as he prepared for another high-stakes meeting. "Now they're begging for a piece of them." Carter had become the very definition of a self-made billionaire, his empire spanning continents and industries. The dirt roads of Willowbrook were a distant memory, replaced by marble floors and private jets. Yet, in the quiet moments, he'd catch a glimpse of his reflection and see the farmer's son still lingering in his eyes. "You can take the boy out of the dirt," he'd joke to his closest aides, "but you can't take the dirt out of the boy." His rise wasn't just about wealth, it was about proving that a man's worth isn't measured by his beginnings but by his willingness to fight. The business world had taken notice, with magazines dubbing him the comeback he deserved and analysts studying his strategies. But Carter knew the best act was yet to come. Somewhere in Willowbrook, Charlotte Patel was still living in the past, a past that was about to collide with his present. And as he often reminded himself during those late-night board meetings, the billionaire's return isn't just a story, it's a revolution. The golden hour bathed Willowbrook in a warm, nostalgic glow as Carter Nielsen stepped out of his sleek, black limousine. The town that had once watched him leave with pity now held its breath in anticipation. His return was the talk of every corner, from the rustic cafe where Mrs. Henderson served her famous apple pie to the old general store where Mr. Jenkins still sold fishing gear. Carter moved through the town with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove, yet everything to reclaim. As he walked past the Patel estate, he noticed Charlotte Patel on the terrace, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. She didn't recognize him at first, which was exactly how he wanted it. "Welcome back, Mr. Nielsen," the town's mayor had said earlier, extending a hand that trembled slightly. "We heard about your success." Carter had merely nodded, his mind already on the real reason he'd come back. The past few years had been a blur of boardrooms and boardwalks, but now, as he stood on the threshold of his old life, he felt a strange mix of emotions. "They didn't just reject me," he reminded himself, "they underestimated me." And that, he thought with a faint smile, was their greatest mistake. The town that had once seen him as just another farmer now witnessed the culmination of his journey, from the dirt roads to the skyscrapers, and back again, but this time on his terms. Charlotte Patel adjusted the strap of her ivory gown, her reflection in the antique mirror showing a woman who had everything, wealth, status, beauty, yet felt a strange emptiness. The Vineyard's anniversary gala was in full swing, with laughter and champagne toasting to years of success. She glanced across the room, her eyes landing on a man who seemed oddly familiar. He stood by the grand fireplace, his presence commanding attention without effort. His tailored suit fit perfectly, and his smile was warm but distant. "Who is he?" Charlotte whispered to a passing guest. "That's Carter Nielsen," the woman replied, her voice filled with awe. "The self-made billionaire who bought half the town's real estate last month." Charlotte's breath caught. Carter? The name stirred memories she'd buried years ago, the boy with wildflowers, the rejected love, the harsh words she'd regretted the moment they left her lips. But this man before her bore no resemblance to that boy. "He's back," she murmured, her fingers tightening around her glass. "And he's everything I mocked him for not being." Across the room, Carter's gaze met hers, and for a moment, time stood still. The old hurt, the old longing, they flickered to life in his eyes, only to be quickly masked by something colder. Charlotte felt a strange mix of emotions. Was this really the same Carter? The boy she'd once seen as beneath her? As she watched him move through the crowd, graceful, powerful, unrecognizable, Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that fate had played a cruel trick. She'd thrown away a diamond and called it dirt, and now the diamond had returned, glittering in a way she could no longer ignore. And as Carter turned away, his attention drawn elsewhere, Charlotte wondered if she'd finally understand the true cost of the price of regret. Charlotte stood on the balcony, the night air doing little to cool the flush of embarrassment and surprise that warmed her cheeks. Carter Nielsen, a name that once belonged to a boy with wildflowers and dreams, now belonged to a man who moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had earned every inch of his success. As the gala continued inside, Charlotte found herself unable to focus on the conversation around her. Her mind kept drifting back to that boy, the one she'd dismissed so callously. She remembered the way he'd looked at her, with such hope in his eyes, and how she'd crushed that hope without a second thought. "What was I thinking?" she whispered to herself, her reflection in the glass doors showing a woman who seemed both familiar and foreign. The Charlotte Patel of today was different from the girl who'd laughed at Carter's ambitions. Time had a way of changing people, of showing them the errors of their ways. And now, seeing Carter again, she couldn't help but wonder what might have been. What if she hadn't been so blinded by her own sense of superiority? What if she'd seen the potential in him instead of focusing on his shortcomings? The questions swirled in her mind, each one a reminder of the price of regret. She glanced back inside, where Carter was now engaged in conversation with her father. Mr. Patel, ever the shrewd businessman, seemed genuinely impressed by Carter's accomplishments. Charlotte's heart ached as she realized that her father, who had always been so critical of Carter, was now eager to form a partnership with him. "How could I have been so wrong about him?" she murmured, her fingers tracing the wildflower Carter had tucked into his lapel, a small but poignant reminder of the past. The flower, simple and unassuming, seemed to mock her complexity and pretension. Carter had valued simplicity and authenticity, while she had chased after superficial grandeur. And now, as she watched him laugh at something her father said, she wondered if it was too late to make amends. But deep down, she knew that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Or could they? The days following their encounter at the gala were a whirlwind for Carter. He found himself constantly aware of Charlotte's presence, even when she wasn't there. Her apology, her vulnerability, it had caught him off guard. He'd built walls over the years, walls designed to keep people like Charlotte out. But now, those walls were beginning to crack. "Focus," he muttered to himself one morning, staring at the merger document spread across his desk. The partnership with the Patel vineyard was too important to let emotions cloud his judgment. Yet, every time he closed his eyes, he saw Charlotte standing in the moonlight, her eyes reflecting the pain of regret. "This is business," he reminded himself. "Nothing more." But even as he said the words, he knew they were a lie. Business and emotion had become intertwined the moment Charlotte had walked back into his life. Charlotte, on her end, was determined. She'd tasted the bitterness of regret and wasn't willing to let it consume her again. She began showing up at Carter's office unexpectedly, finding reasons to cross paths with him. "I need to discuss the merger details," she'd say, her tone professional but her eyes betraying her nervousness. Carter would listen, his mind sharp and analytical, but his heart would race with each encounter. The dynamic between them had shifted. Once, he had been the one chasing after her, begging for a chance. Now, the roles were reversed. And Carter found himself enjoying the chase, a dangerous game that could either lead to redemption or deeper wounds. "You're persistent," he remarked during one of their meetings, a faint smile playing on his lips. Charlotte nodded, her gaze steady. "I've learned from the best," she replied. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Carter knew he should push her away, should protect himself from the possibility of being hurt again. But something in Charlotte's determination resonated with him, reminded him of the boy who'd once dreamed of more. And so, he let the game continue, each encounter bringing them closer, yet keeping them at a careful distance. Because in this dance of redemption and pride, one misstep could change everything. As the merger negotiations progressed, the entire town of Willowbrook buzzed with anticipation. The union of Nielsen Enterprises and Patel Vineyards wasn't just a business deal, it was a symbolic reunion of two worlds that had once been divided by class and prejudice. Reporters camped outside the Patel estate, cameras ready to capture every moment. "It's like a fairy tale," Mrs. Henderson gushed at her cafe, serving apple pie to a group of eager customers. The poor farmer and the wealthy heiress, destined to be together despite everything. But not everyone was convinced. Old Man Jenkins, sharpening his axe at the general store, snorted in disbelief. "Fairy tale, my foot," he grumbled. "That boy's got a score to settle, and the Patel girl's just the pawn in his game." Meanwhile, Carter and Charlotte navigated the chaos with careful precision. Publicly, they were the epitome of professionalism, discussing terms and strategies with the media watching their every move. Privately, their interactions were charged with emotion, a whispered conversation in a hallway, a lingering touch during a handshake, a shared glance across a crowded room. "The town's eating up this, from farmer to fortune, story," Carter remarked one evening, as they reviewed marketing materials for the merger. Charlotte smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "And what about you?" she asked. "Do you believe in fairy tales?" Carter's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "I believe in second chances," he said finally. "But I also believe in consequences." The answer hung between them, a promise and a warning all at once. And as the cameras continued to flash and the reporters continued to write, Carter and Charlotte knew that their story was far from over. The tables had turned, but the final chapter remained unwritten, a blank page waiting for their decisions to fill it. And in the quiet moments between their public appearances, Charlotte couldn't help but wonder, was she ready to face the consequences of her past, or would the weight of regret continue to chain her to it? Only time would tell. But for now, the game was afoot, and neither of them was ready to back down. The merger between Nielsen Enterprises and Patel Vineyards sent shockwaves through Willowbrook. The very people who had once sneered at Carter's ambitions now found themselves in awe of his achievements. At the town's annual Harvest Festival, the atmosphere was electric. Stalls lined the main street, selling everything from fresh produce to handmade crafts, while children ran around with faces painted in the colors of the season. But the real attraction was the announcement of the merger. Carter stood at the podium, the morning sun casting a warm glow over the crowd. "This partnership isn't just about business," he began, his voice steady and confident. "It's about bringing new opportunities to Willowbrook, to the people who have always believed in me, and even to those who didn't." The crowd erupted in applause, but Carter's gaze drifted to where Charlotte stood, her expression a mix of pride and uncertainty. He smiled faintly before continuing. "Years ago, I left this town with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. Today, I return not just as a son of Willowbrook, but as someone who has proven that dreams do come true, if you're willing to fight for them." The words hung in the air, a testament to his journey from a poor farmer to a self-made billionaire. Old Man Jenkins, who had once dismissed Carter's ambitions, stood in the front row with a rare look of admiration on his face. "By gum, the boy's done it," he muttered to his wife. "He's made something of himself." Mrs. Henderson, serving her famous apple pie from a nearby stall, wiped a tear from her eye. "I always knew he had it in him," she said, her voice choked with emotion. The sense of pride and awe was palpable. Carter had not just succeeded, he had transcended the limitations others had placed on him. And as he stepped down from the podium, the crowd parted for him, their eyes reflecting a newfound respect. Charlotte watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She had doubted him once, but now she saw the man he had become, a man who had turned the town's skepticism into a testament to his resilience. And as Carter made his way toward her, his gaze steady and sure, she realized that the community's shock was nothing compared to her own shock at the depth of her feelings for him. The past was a heavy burden, but the future held a promise she couldn't ignore. And as the festival continued around them, with laughter and music filling the air, Charlotte couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where the boy she had once rejected became the man who changed everything. Charlotte Patel stood at the edge of the vineyard, the morning dew clinging to the grass beneath her feet. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. She had come here early, hoping for a moment of peace before the day's events unfolded. But peace was elusive. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, all centered around one man, Carter Nielsen. The merger between Nielsen Enterprises and Patel Vineyards had been announced to the town with great fanfare, but for Charlotte, it was just another reminder of what she had lost and what she was trying to regain. She had made mistakes in the past, mistakes that had hurt Carter deeply. But now, seeing the man he had become, she was determined to make amends. Determined to win him back. The question was, would it be enough? Was it too late? The sound of approaching footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Carter walking toward her, his presence as commanding as ever. There was a time when she had looked down on him, when she had seen only a poor farmer with unrealistic dreams. How wrong she had been. The man before her now was a self-made billionaire, a man who had built an empire from nothing. And yet, despite his success, there was still a part of him that carried the pain of the past. "Carter," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of hope and uncertainty. He nodded in acknowledgement, his gaze steady but unreadable. "Charlotte," he replied. The air between them was thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. "I wanted to talk to you," she began, taking a step closer. "I wanted to say that I'm sorry, for everything. For how I treated you in the past. For not seeing the person you truly were." Her words were heartfelt, but she could see the hesitation in his eyes. Could he forgive her? Could he let go of the hurt? Carter took a deep breath, his expression softening slightly. "You've said that before," he said gently. "But apologies only go so far. Actions speak louder than words." His response was a gentle reminder that this was a new chapter, one that required more than just sorry. Charlotte nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I know," she said. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes, to prove to you that I've changed. That I'm not the same person who hurt you all those years ago." Her determination was evident in her eyes, a determination that had grown stronger with each passing day. Carter studied her for a moment, his gaze searching hers. "I want to believe you," he said finally. "I really do. But the path to forgiveness isn't an easy one. It requires patience, understanding, and a willingness to face the past together." His words were a bridge that Charlotte was eager to cross. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to face whatever comes our way." And with that, a flicker of hope ignited between them, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could build a future from the ashes of their past. But the journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and unknowns. And as they stood there, the vineyard stretching out behind them, Charlotte couldn't help but wonder, would their story end in redemption or remain a tale of lost opportunities? Only time would tell. But for now, the door was open, and the choice was hers. Would she walk through it, or would she let fear keep her rooted in place? The answer, like the dawn, was just beginning to reveal itself. Charlotte stood alone in her childhood bedroom, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The room was much as it had been when she was a girl, filled with memories of a life she no longer recognized. She ran her fingers over the edge of the dresser, where a small wooden box sat hidden in the back. Taking a deep breath, she opened it, revealing its contents, a collection of letters, yellowed with age, tied together with a faded ribbon. These were the letters Carter had sent her after he left Willowbrook, letters she had never read. She had received them, of course, but in her pride and fear, she had refused to open them. Instead, she had tucked them away, along with the wildflowers he had given her, in this box. "I was scared," she whispered to the empty room. Scared of what they might say, scared of what they might reveal about my feelings. The truth was, Charlotte had never been able to confront the depth of her emotions for Carter. She had mocked his ambitions not because she didn't believe in him, but because she was afraid of the power he held over her heart. I was weak, she admitted, her voice breaking. I pushed him away because I was too afraid to let him in. The letters remained unopened, a symbol of the opportunities she had let slip through her fingers. But now, as she stood at the precipice of a new beginning, Charlotte knew it was time to face her past. With trembling hands, she untied the ribbon and picked up the first letter. "Dear Charlotte," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to you from the city, where things are difficult but not impossible. I think of you often and wonder if you ever regretted the way things ended between us. I do. Every day. But I'm also reminded of why I loved you, took my breath away, you did. Still does, to be honest." Charlotte's tears fell freely now as she read on. "I'm building something here, something big. And I wish more than anything that you could see it. Not because I want to prove you wrong, but because I want you to be proud of me. The way I was always proud of you." The letter was signed simply, Carter. As she read, Charlotte felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying. These letters held the truth behind her rejection, the unspoken fears and doubts that had driven her actions. And now, with Carter's words before her, she finally understood the depth of the hurt she had caused. But more importantly, she understood the depth of his love, a love that had endured despite everything. "I'm sorry, Carter," she whispered, her heart heavy with regret. "I'm so sorry." The words couldn't change the past, but they were a start. And as Charlotte continued to read, she felt a flicker of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to make amends. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and unknowns. But for the first time in years, Charlotte felt a sense of clarity. She knew what she had to do. And with the letters in hand, she made her way downstairs, determined to face Carter and tell him the truth, a truth that had taken her far too long to acknowledge. The door to their future stood open, and Charlotte was ready to walk through it, whatever awaited her on the other side. Carter stood alone in his study, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the room. The letters Charlotte had given him lay open on the desk, their words still fresh in his mind. "I loved you," he whispered, echoing the sentiment from his past self. The admission had caught him off guard. Charlotte had kept his letters all these years, unread but preserved. Why? The question weighed heavily on his heart. Had she kept them out of guilt, or was there something more? The truth behind her rejection had begun to surface, a truth rooted in fear and vulnerability rather than disdain. But could that be enough to heal the wounds of the past? The struggle within Carter was palpable. On one hand, there was the pride that had driven him for years, the same pride that had turned rejection into fuel for his success. The comeback he deserved had been his silent battle cry, and it had served him well. To forgive Charlotte now felt like relinquishing some of that hard-won victory. On the other hand, there was the lingering love he had never fully extinguished, a love that had endured through years of silence and absence. The memory of her laughter, the way she looked in the morning light, the depth of her eyes, these things still had power over him. And now, faced with her honesty and vulnerability, Carter found himself at a crossroads. Could he let go of the past and embrace the possibility of a future with Charlotte? Or would pride keep him rooted in the pain of yesterday? The days that followed were a blur of emotion. Charlotte's presence hung in the air, even when she wasn't there. Carter found himself replaying her words in his mind. "I was scared. Scared of my feelings, scared of the future." Her admission had cracked open a door he had long kept locked. But pride was a stubborn companion. It whispered to him of all the reasons to walk away, to preserve his dignity, to avoid the risk of being hurt again. Yet love, that persistent and unwavering force, countered with memories of what they had once shared and the potential of what could be. "Is it worth the risk?" he asked himself one night, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. The answer wasn't clear. But as he lay there, the weight of his journey from a poor farmer to a self-made billionaire pressed down on him. He had built an empire on the foundations of resilience and ambition. Could love be the next frontier to conquer? Or would it be the force that finally broke him? The decision wasn't his alone to make. Charlotte, too, was grappling with her own demons. She had taken the first steps toward redemption by revealing the letters and her hidden feelings, but the path forward was uncertain. "I'm willing to try," she had said, her eyes glistening with hope and fear. Carter knew that if there was to be a future between them, it would require both of them to confront their pasts and the scars they carried. The town of Willowbrook watched with bated breath as the drama unfolded. Reporters camped outside the Patel estate, cameras ready to capture every moment. The merger between Nielsen Enterprises and Patel Vineyards was no longer just a business deal, it had become a symbol of redemption and second chances. But for Carter and Charlotte, the real battle was internal, a battle between love and pride, between the desire to heal and the fear of being hurt again. One evening, as Carter reviewed the merger documents in his study, there was a soft knock at the door. Charlotte stood there, her expression gentle but determined. "May I come in?" she asked. Carter nodded, setting aside his pen. "Of course." She entered and closed the door behind her, taking a seat across from him. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady. "About us, about the past, about what might be possible." Carter's heart raced as he waited for her to continue. "I understand if you can't forgive me," she said softly. "I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm willing to fight, for us, for a future together. Whatever that looks like." The room fell silent as Carter absorbed her words. The struggle between love and pride raged within him. Could he let go of the past and embrace the possibility of a future with Charlotte? Or would pride keep him rooted in the pain of yesterday? The answer, he realized, wasn't about winning or losing. It was about choosing what mattered most. And as he looked into Charlotte's eyes, those eyes that had once looked at him with disdain and now looked at him with hope, he knew that the choice was his to make. The door to their future stood open, and it was time to decide whether to walk through it or walk away. The answer, like the dawn, was just beginning to reveal itself. The Willowbrook vineyard was bathed in the golden light of a setting sun as Carter and Charlotte stood at the edge of the fields, the air thick with the scent of ripe grapes and the promise of change. The merger between Nielsen Enterprises and Patel Vineyards was on the brink of being finalized, but for Carter and Charlotte, the business deal was merely a backdrop to the far more complex dance of their hearts. "We've come full circle," Charlotte murmured, her voice carrying a mix of wonder and uncertainty. Carter nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky met the earth. "Full circle, but not quite," he replied. "We still have a choice to make." The choice he referred to hung between them, a choice that would define their future and determine whether they would find peace in the past or forge a future together. The days leading up to the merger's finalization had been a whirlwind of activity. Reporters, investors, and well-wishers descended on Willowbrook, eager to witness the union of two worlds once divided by class and prejudice. But amidst the chaos, Carter and Charlotte had found moments of quiet connection, shared glances across crowded rooms, whispered conversations in hallways, and late-night talks under the stars. "It's like we're rediscovering each other," Charlotte had said during one of those nights, her fingers brushing against Carter's as they sat on the vineyard's terrace. Carter had smiled, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt. "We are," he agreed. "But the question is, do we like what we find?" The answer wasn't clear. The past was a heavy burden, filled with regrets and missed opportunities. But the future held a promise that neither could ignore, a promise of redemption, of growth, and of the unexpected return of love. As the final documents for the merger lay ready on Carter's desk, he found himself unable to sign them. The pen hovered in his hand, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Charlotte stood beside him, her presence both comforting and unsettling. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. Carter shook his head. "It's not about the merger," he replied. "It's about us. About whether we can move forward, or whether we're forever tied to the past." Charlotte's gaze met his, her eyes reflecting the same turmoil. "I want to move forward," she whispered. "More than anything." Carter's heart ached with the depth of her sincerity. He wanted to believe her, to believe that they could build something new from the ashes of their history. But fear held him back. Fear of being hurt again, fear of losing himself in the process. "I need time," he said finally, setting the pen down. "I can't promise you a future right now. But I won't shut you out completely." Charlotte nodded, her heart pounding. "I'll wait," she said. "As long as it takes." And with that, the moment passed, leaving both of them with a sense of hope, hope that was fragile, uncertain, but very real. The town of Willowbrook held its breath as the deadline for the merger approached. Rumors swirled about Carter's hesitation, about the unresolved tension between him and Charlotte. Some whispered that the deal was doomed, that old wounds couldn't be healed. Others held out hope that love would prevail, that the boy who had once been rejected would find his way back to the girl who had let him go. "It's like a modern-day fairy tale," gushed Mrs. Henderson at her cafe, serving apple pie to a group of eager customers. "The poor farmer and the wealthy heiress, destined to be together despite everything." Old man Jenkins, sharpening his axe at the general store, snorted in disbelief. "Fairy tale, my foot," he grumbled. "That boy's got a score to settle, and the Patel girl's just the pawn in his game." Meanwhile, Carter and Charlotte navigated the chaos with careful precision. Publicly, they were the epitome of professionalism, discussing terms and strategies with the media watching their every move. Privately, their interactions were charged with emotion, a whispered conversation in a hallway, a lingering touch during a handshake, a shared glance across a crowded room. "The town's eating up this, from farmer to fortune, story," Carter remarked one evening, as they reviewed marketing materials for the merger. Charlotte smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "And what about you?" she asked. "Do you believe in fairy tales?" Carter's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "I believe in second chances," he said finally. "But I also believe in consequences." The answer hung between them, a promise and a warning all at once. And as the cameras continued to flash and the reporters continued to write, Carter and Charlotte knew that their story was far from over. The decision that would define them was still to come, a decision that would determine whether they found peace in the past or a future together. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the vineyard, Charlotte couldn't help but wonder, would they finally break free from the chains of their history, or would the weight of regret continue to bind them? Only time would tell. But for now, the door was open, and the choice was theirs. Would they walk through it together, or would fear keep them rooted in place? The answer, like the dawn, was just beginning to reveal itself. The Willowbrook vineyard stood bathed in the soft glow of a new dawn, the air carrying the promise of change and renewal. Carter Nielsen stood at the edge of the fields, the pen in his hand hovering over the merger documents that would cement his partnership with the Patel family. The journey had been long, filled with twists and turns that had tested his resolve and his heart. From the dirt roads of his humble beginnings to the skyscrapers of his empire, Carter had built a life defined by resilience and ambition. But now, as he stood on the threshold of this new chapter, he couldn't help but think of the person who had once been his everything, Charlotte Patel. Charlotte, for her part, paced the terrace of her family's estate, her heart a drumbeat of anticipation and fear. She had come so far in her journey of self-discovery and redemption, but the final step remained elusive. The man she had once rejected stood on the brink of a decision that would define their futures. Would he choose to forgive and embrace the possibility of a future together? Or would pride and the weight of the past keep him from her forever? The hours ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. The town of Willowbrook held its breath, the merger hanging in the balance. Reporters camped outside the Patel estate, their cameras ready to capture the moment that would determine the fate of the rags-to-riches romance that had captivated the hearts of so many. Inside, Charlotte found Carter in the study, the morning light streaming through the windows and casting long shadows across the room. "Carter," she began, her voice steady but carrying the weight of unspoken emotions. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Charlotte," he replied. The air between them crackled with the tension of unresolved feelings and the promise of what could be. "I need to know," she said, taking a step closer. "Do you still love me?" The question hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Carter's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "I never stopped," he admitted. "But love isn't enough. We both know that." Charlotte's heart ached with the truth of his words. Love was a foundation, but trust and forgiveness were the pillars that wooed their future. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Carter took a deep breath, his decision crystallizing in that moment. "We start over," he said finally. "Not as the people we were, but as the people we've become. We acknowledge the past, but we don't let it define us." The words were a bridge between their worlds, a bridge built on honesty, vulnerability, and the fragile hope of redemption. And so, with the dawn breaking around them and the vineyard stretching out behind, Carter and Charlotte took their first steps toward a future that was uncertain but filled with possibility. The door to their past remained open, its lessons etched into their hearts. But ahead of them lay a path untaken, a path that would be shaped by their choices, their courage, and the enduring power of love. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, they faced it together. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm light over Willowbrook, Charlotte couldn't help but believe that maybe, just maybe, their story was finally turning a new page, a page filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a future they could build together. As the sun sets over Willowbrook, the story of Carter and Charlotte remains a testament to the complexities of love, pride, and redemption. Their journey from rejection to potential reconciliation has woven a tapestry of emotions that resonates with anyone who has ever dared to dream, to love, or to seek a second chance. Carter's transformation from a poor farmer to a self-made billionaire is not just a personal victory but a reminder that our past does not have to define our future. Charlotte's struggle with regret and her quest for redemption highlight the universal human experience of making mistakes and seeking forgiveness. But what does the future hold for them? Will they find peace in the past or forge a future together? The answer lies not just in their hands but in the hearts of those who have followed their story. As we draw this chapter to a close, we invite you to reflect on your own journey. Have you ever experienced a love that seemed lost forever, only to find it again in the most unexpected way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what impacted you most about Carter and Charlotte's story. Did you expect their path to lead here, or were you surprised by the twists and turns of fate? Before you go, take a moment to like this video if it resonated with you. Share it with someone who might appreciate the tale of love after rejection, of growth after loss, and of the unexpected return of what once seemed gone forever. And if you haven't already, consider following our channel to stay updated on the next chapters of Carter and Charlotte's story. After all, in the world of Willowbrook, the sun may set, but the dawn always brings new possibilities. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Until next time, keep believing in second chances, they might just be the most beautiful opportunities life has to offer.